What you doing there? Testing my game. Is that the Mario jump I hear? I have no idea what a Mario is. Dude, you need to change that sound. You can't use that in a commercial game. No way. Do you have any idea how hard this sound was to make? I had to go into Google and type video game jump noise and then download it. It was a nightmare. Did you try copyright-free video game jump noise? God damn it.
Hey guys, welcome. I have made plenty of mistakes in my own game development journey, and I want to share some of them with you so that hopefully you can avoid some of the same mistakes that I've made, and you'll also be better prepared to make your mark in this industry. I am not an expert like some of the other YouTubers you might watch. I'm honestly just getting started myself in this industry, but I think that's a pro because some of the mistakes I've made are really fresh in my mind. This one's really quick. Starting a devlog is not for everyone. This is an individual decision that you need to make. So there's no general one-size-fits-all advice that I can really give here. But I will say, before you decide to start a devlog, you're going to want to put some real thought and research into it. Here's why. A devlog on the surface sounds like easy, good exposure for your game, as well as a fun way to document the process of development for your potential fans. But the reality is a devlog is not necessarily the easiest way for you to market your game. It's free and it can actually end up paying you and becoming a really solid source of income. But the amount of time that you have to sink into a YouTube channel in order to make even a little bit of traction, it can take years for some people. Devlogs take a lot of time to put together. It takes my wife and I a minimum of a week to throw a devlog together from start to finish. And that is with a team of 2 working on it. And that's a minimum of a week of our time every single month for a devlog. The YouTube algorithm is not going to share your video if you just really quickly slap something together that is not intriguing to the viewer. So if you're not really going to put in a solid effort into your videos, then you might be wasting your time. And if you are willing to make a solid effort and produce high quality videos, then you have to be comfortable with the fact that a lot of your work time is now going to be working on making videos, not necessarily working on your game. There's nothing right or wrong with this either way. It's just a matter of being prepared for the amount of work that it's going to be. I'm not going to talk about scope creep as something that you need to avoid because that's already talked about everywhere else. I actually really want to talk about the opposite problem, which is being too rigid with your game design. Scope creep is when you're continually adding stuff onto your game and making the scope of your project bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And this can happen due to being too flexible with your game design. It can happen due to lack of planning. It could also just be that the game designer is feeling self-conscious and they just keep adding stuff, hoping that that one feature will finally make the game feel good enough. And that's scope creep, and that is a problem, but being too rigid with your game design can be really hurtful as well. Video games start as just a series of ideas that you have in your head, and not all ideas that you have in your head are going to end up being as cool or as entertaining or as funny or as awesome as you originally thought they were going to be. Maybe you're working on a platformer and you've got a character with a really floaty jump, and there's a lot of horizontal velocity so that basically in one jump you can just move from one side of the room to the other because of how fast you move. But maybe you really excel at designing tight levels in really confined spaces. And so now you have to make a decision. Are you going to change your levels to match your character design? Or are you going to change the way your character controls to match the layout of the levels? Because if you're being really rigid and you change nothing, that's just going to end up with something that really doesn't work well. So without some flexibility in your game design, you may end up having things that you're trying to fit together that really just don't mesh well together. A really big part of making video games is just making thousands of tiny little decisions and hoping that the end result of all those decisions is a product that's really fun to play. But as your game starts to take form, as you put more and more work into it, it actually kind of starts to develop a bit of a personality of its own. Like, you may have pictured that you were designing a combat focused game, but instead it kind of seems like your game wants to be more focused on puzzles than on combat. So just because your game design document or your plans say one thing, it doesn't mean that those plans can't change. Your game will evolve over time, and letting it change within reason will result in a much better game.
How's this for a coin collection sound? Yeah, no, you can't use that either. Crap.
When I first quit my job, I first started working on a roguelike game, which honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me. Why? Because I don't play roguelike games. Honestly, I want to like roguelike games. I want to like them, but I often don't finish them. So obviously there's some sort of element there that just personally isn't for me. I've played lots of Enter the Gungeon, but I play in really short bursts and I'll very quickly get bored and then stop playing for a really long period of time. And despite all the hours I've sunk into it, I've never finished it. It's actually a really great game. It's just not personally my kind of thing. So why the heck did I start making one in the first place? Because it felt manageable. It felt like something that I could finish within a year or so and then publish it and move on to another game. So if you break it down, what I really did was I made a business decision instead of an artistic decision. And which way you decide to go is ultimately up to you and your level of risk tolerance. If you want to make your dream video game something that you just can't get out of your head, it's probably going to take you a lot longer than designing something that you feel a lot more neutral about. But ultimately, you have to take your own motivation into account. Can you work on something hours on end, day after day, when you don't even really care about the end result all that much? Some people can. I definitely can't. There was a noticeable, huge uptick in my energy and in my work output and in my motivation when I quit working on my roguelike and started working on my dream game, which is a metroidvania. And this happened because I'm passionate about metroidvanias. I love them. I have great memories playing metroidvania games. And honestly, I really feel like I have no business designing and making a roguelike game because I've barely ever played them. So know yourself and know what keeps you motivated. And do everything that you can to keep yourself excited for your project. Picking a genre that you love will go a really long way. Hollow Knight is my favorite game of all time. And knowing it was mainly just two guys who created that game, I often compare myself to them. And when I compare myself to them, I'm putting them up on a pedestal. They're way up here, way up here. And I'm just me, way down here. You can't even see my hand. And I'm not going to pretend like I've stopped doing this and I figured out how to fix this and I don't compare myself to people anymore, because that's not true. I still very much do. I do it all the time. As humans, it's really natural for us to compare ourselves to other people that we look up to. That doesn't mean it's a mentally healthy thing to do, though. Just because someone out there created an experience that you really loved, and creating that game feels like it's a little bit outside of your current skill level, that doesn't mean that you can't also create a game that other people are going to love, because you absolutely can. Also, keep in mind, when you compare yourself to others, what are you comparing yourself to exactly? You're not really getting to peek behind their work curtains to see what their daily progress is like, how many struggles they also had to overcome. All that you really get to see is what they let you see, what they put in their devlogs or their blogs or their websites or their interviews, whatever, or maybe just their finished game itself. They are human too. They had struggles. They had doubts too. They also had a hard time figuring out how to animate some particular thing or how to code some mechanic that they really wanted in their game. Here's the thing. You want to make a video game, it's going to take a while. And if you're constantly putting other devs on this pedestal high above yourself, it's always going to feel like you're failing at some sort of level because you haven't achieved the greatness that they have yet. And it's really hard to work on something for years and years and years when on a daily basis you feel like you're failing or you feel like you suck. That will drain you and it will dry up all of your energy. You are unique. You have a unique set of circumstances. You have a unique sense of humor, a unique sense of what's fun, what's cool, what would be fun to play, and how to solve your game design challenges and problems. If you set out and you aim to make the funnest experience possible, you put your ego aside to allow room for feedback or other ideas that might actually work better than yours, and you constantly strive to do better work than you did yesterday, then you're going to be just fine, and your game is going to end up being as good as it can possibly be.
Hey, what do you think of this sound effect for my character eating food? No, just stop.
When you want something really badly, like going full-time as a game developer or developing some sort of critically acclaimed masterpiece, then that want is going to become a part of your identity. And when something like this becomes a part of your identity, it can be really easy to lose the joy in what it is that you're doing every day. Why? Because when you have a specific identity, I am an indie game developer, your ego gets involved because you're trying to prove something to yourself and probably to other people as well. And when your ego gets involved in any work process, you're going to be more miserable and your work is just not going to be as good as it could be. You'll be miserable because you will obsess over your game. Even when you're not working and you're supposed to be spending time with your family and enjoying your time away from work, in your mind, you're going to be programming, or you're going to be solving problems, or you're going to be thinking about that thing that needs to be fixed. And mentally, you're not even there actually spending time with your family. And your work isn't going to be as good because now you're working on a game in order to prove to yourself and probably to other people that you are actually good enough to make a video game. Your focus is in the wrong place. Creating something fun that people will love and be entertained or intrigued by in some way, versus creating something to make you look smart or make you look competent. Which one do you think is going to end up being better in the end? I'm taking a course for YouTube creators because I want this channel to entertain and inspire as many people as possible. And also, honestly, because I want as many wish lists on my game as possible. You can wishlist our game, Veil of Maia, on Steam to support us. Link is below. But in this course, they teach you to make content for your viewers. Focus less on what you want to say and focus more on what you think they want to hear. Make things that other people want to watch. And the perfect example of this is the devlog where I fixed a bunch of bugs and glitches. But I spent about 3 to 4 hours writing the perfect script for this devlog, but it was complete trash and I ended up having to rewrite it. And it was trash because I was focused on me and the fact that I wanted to be seen as smart. This is something that I do to cover up insecurities that I have, and I have to fight it. But some of the bugs that I fixed in our game, I was really proud of the fixes that I came up with. Some of the solutions I thought were really elegant, and I was kind of on this high because of how proud I felt of myself. Now, where my mistake was all of that ego got put into the script, and the script ended up being very technical with lots of code and lots of explanations and context behind it all. It was really just me jabbering on about a whole bunch of stuff that I felt really smart about, and that was the story that I wanted to tell. But that definitely was not the most entertaining way to tell the story of fixing a bunch of bugs for a game. My focus was on me instead of the viewer. So do everything in your power to put your ego aside because you'll be happier and your game will turn out better.